Okay, let's get this out of the way. This exists, so does this, and apparently so does this, even though it's supposed to premiere this year and I haven't heard anything about a release date yet. Now watch, a premiere date's gonna get announced the day this video goes up. But most importantly, before any of these, was this. Teen Titans, the original 2003 show that captured a generation of future comic book fans and control freaks, myself included. But through this show full of action and comedy and drama and waffles, there is one mystery that folks have requested we give a hot take on more than a couple of times. And it's concerning the identity of the mysterious, roguish villain, Red X. And I'm not sure how to tell you all this, but halfway through the season 1 episode Masks, Red X is revealed to be Robin. And even then, the hints throughout the episode were pretty obvious, so I'm not really sure what you want me to cover. I'm sorry? Red X came back after that? And it wasn't Robin in disguise. Huh. Okay, so yes, Robin was originally Red X, but the question here obviously is more about the identity of our mystery date who takes up the moniker of Red X after Robin retires it in the episode Masks. And not only is it a question that was never answered in the show, but the show itself was more than willing to take a few lighthearted jabs at the mystery, and trust me, we're gonna get to those soon. But before we start anything, it's probably worth pointing out that DC Comics continuity has a reputation for being somewhat convoluted. There are a bazillion different timelines between New Earth, Prime Earth, and everything in between. If I named every single DC continuity timeline and retcon, we would be here for like 2 hours. And while the Teen Titans TV show for the most part borrows from ideas present in the new Teen Titans comics of the 80s and 90s, the show is pretty careful to contain our heroes in their own standalone timeline so as to not complicate things. So with that in mind, we're probably going to be drawing from many places in the DC canon, but we're gonna have a slightly stricter focus on the New Earth timeline, which began in the 80s. Cool? Cool. So to get into this, let's start with everything that we know about Red X himself, and let's start with the basics. For those of us who need a refresher, Red X shows up in the episode X, having somehow stolen Robin's suit, which was held under Robin's own strict security. From this, we can gather that Red X must be an incredibly adept thief, even without the advantage of things the Red X suit provides, like a teleportation device. We can also tell that he's a physically capable person, since having Robin steal his utility belt in the same episode wasn't much of a hindrance to him. I mean, he leapt off a cliff immediately after that happened, and then he was fine afterwards, so he's probably a tough dude. The other thing about Red X is that he's a morally gray / chaotic neutral type of character. Yes, he is shown among the villains gathered by the Brotherhood of Evil in the episode Homecoming Part 2, but Red X has made it clear that his main interest is in being a thief that only looks after himself. So with these ideas in mind, there are a couple of possibilities toward Red X's identity that are worth mentioning before we get into the meatier stuff. Our first and arguably silliest possibility is that Red X could be a villain that can change their form, like Clayface, who can pretty much impersonate just about anyone. But it's not a very substantial theory because there's literally no evidence other than Clayface has impersonated people before. Besides, the whole point of impersonating people is to fool others into believing that you're someone else. So then what would be the purpose in disguising yourself as someone else, a complete rando, mind you, only to cover your face? Also, Clayface never really appeared in the show, and none of this really adds up, so we're gonna move on. Next up, we have another character who never actually appears in the show otherwise, but in this case, it actually is a little odd, because elsewhere in DC Comics, this character actually does have a pretty huge grudge against the Titans. Grant Wilson, otherwise known as Ravager. In the comics, Grant Wilson is a rogue whose entire mantra basically revolves around swearing to eliminate the Teen Titans since they disrupted his life in a major way during one of their crazy adventures. Long story short, some aliens were after Starfire and Grant's apartment got caught in the crossfire. You know, normal Titan stuff. With nothing more to lose, he lets Hive scientists use experimental procedures on him to give him the same powers as his idol, Deathstroke, also known as Slade Wilson, also known as Grant Wilson's father. You'd think that a character whose story is so closely associated with the Titans and one of the main antagonists of the show would have some kind of role to play, right? Grant's physical abilities would definitely explain some aspects of Red X's character along with the moral ambiguity. But a big problem here is that Grant is usually going after the Titans themselves as opposed to Red X, who seems to see the Titans as more of obstacles than anything else. After all, by his own admission, Red X is just a thief. But okay, there's another huge possibility that I've danced around long enough, so let's get down to it. The prevailing theory is that Red X is most likely another Robin. And the points in favor of this are pretty overwhelming, so here's a quick lightning round of evidence. Numbers 1 and 2, Robin and Red X seem to have virtually identical body types and skill sets. Even their fighting styles are similar, though Red X doesn't use a staff like Robin because that would make things way too obvious. Could this be because they both had the same mentor in Batman? Furthermore, Red X possesses intimate knowledge of the Titans' operations and Robin's tech, as he knew about the Red X suit and uses it in pretty much the exact way that Robin did. Next, in Red X's first appearance in the episode X, Red X tells Robin that he knows how to play the hero, implying that he's done this before.
I thought you didn't like to play the hero. Doesn't mean I don't know how.
Along with this, the voice of Red X, even after Robin hangs up the mask, is Scott Menville, who also voices Robin. So why keep him as the voice of Red X when Red X is clearly a different person? Most fans are happy to assume that the Red X suit has some kind of voice changer, which is fine, but there is something to be said about this intriguing casting decision. Could it be a hint toward Red X being another Robin? Possibly even a clone of Robin from another timeline? Okay, probably not that last point, but also maybe that last point. Not to mention Red X's actions in the episode Revved Up. It's a silly episode, but the plot is all about how Ding Dong Daddy holds one of Robin's greatest secrets hostage. And then the whole episode basically devolves into a wacky races while everyone and their mom tries to grab it. But who is the first villain that shows up in pursuit to claim Robin's greatest secret for themselves? Red X. And while he claims he only wants the secret so he can sell it, there might be more to that than we think. Robin even asks Red X why he's interested. After all, the secret only really has value to Robin, to which Red X replies,
I wouldn't be so sure.
Which is a suitably enigmatic word choice. And just as a final minor point, what's Red X's vehicle of choice? A motorcycle, just like Robin's. But then the question becomes, well, which Robin is he? There have been quite a few Robins in the past, so really there are so many different options for us to choose. All right, fine, let's talk about Jason Todd. As many people are aware, the moniker of Robin has been worn by many people over the years. But in the main canon, the first Robin was Dick Grayson, which is the Robin that's present throughout the run of Teen Titans. It's never explicitly said, but there are enough hints dropped in the series that fans can put the pieces together pretty easily. For instance, in the episodes where we're offered a glimpse into the future, we see that Robin went on to become Nightwing, a trait unique to Dick Grayson in the overall DC universe. But the Robin to come after Dick Grayson became Nightwing was Jason Todd, who has an interesting past, to say the absolute least. To once again make a pretty long story short, Jason, as Robin, was captured by the Joker and then horribly beaten with a crowbar before being left to enjoy some quality time with one of the Joker's bombs. Batman arrives too late to save him, and Jason Todd, the second Robin, is killed. I mean, eventually Batman kinda sorta got over it and brought up other people to take on the mantle as Robin, like Tim Drake and Stephanie Brown, and eventually his own son, Damian Wayne, but we're not exactly quite done with Jason Todd yet. He comes back to life because comic books. Again, it's a long story, but it involves Superboy Prime literally punching the timeline and resurrecting Jason Todd as an unintended side effect. And as you can imagine, Todd wasn't too thrilled about being left to die by Batman. And since then, Jason Todd's been sorta popping up here and there, usually masquerading as some mysterious villain or anti-hero like the Red Hood. So naturally, a lot of people feel justified in assuming that Red X is Jason Todd. But apart from Todd's backstory, what else can we draw from? Well, first of all, the show hasn't shied away from suggesting exactly this, with Beast Boy acting as the voice of the fans in the new Teen Titans short Red X Unmasked. Though even in that short, a definitive answer was never reached.
Keep guessing, kids.
I still think you're Jason Todd!
Not to mention that in the episode X, Jason Todd makes a rather conspicuous appearance on Beast Boy's... I have no word for what this is other than conspiracy chart on Red X's possible identities. Not to mention that Red X, being a former Robin like Jason Todd, would fill in most of the gaps that we know about Red X. You know, the things about being familiar with Robin's tech, the fighting styles, all that mess. And even within the world of the comics, Jason Todd would go on to usurp another one of Dick Grayson's characters in a post-Infinite Crisis storyline where he briefly impersonates Nightwing. Granted, this story was published after the conclusion of the Teen Titans TV series, but it does set the precedent that Jason Todd is a pretty consistent thorn in Dick Grayson's side. Also, Jason Todd as the Red Hood was introduced to DC Comics around the same time that Red X also made his debut in Teen Titans. So could Red X be intended as a more toned down version of Jason Todd as the Red Hood? As enticing as the Red X is Jason Todd theory is, there are a few things that might make you change your mind if you look at them a little closer. First, let's get the obvious one out of the way. Red X in the show addresses Robin as Kid and is a little taller than Robin, implying that he might be a little older than Robin. But even if you do shrug off this language as posturing, you've probably also astutely remembered that Jason Todd was the second Robin and canonically younger than Dick Grayson. And he was only fully incorporated into the Batman family as Dick Grayson became Nightwing. And while Teen Titans may exist in its own continuity for the most part, it still maintains the constants of the overall DC comic universe. But then if that's the case, how can Beast Boy's conspiracy chart show Jason Todd dressed as Robin if Dick Grayson is already clearly Robin? Furthermore, how could Jason Todd have gone rogue as Red X if he was never killed by the Joker? This is like a time paradox. Obviously, we can't make any assumptions about how Batman operates within Teen Titans since he's absent for the entire duration of the show, and I know better than to bring Teen Titans Go into this. We could assume that in this timeline, Batman had already taken Jason Todd under his bat wing as Robin left to join the Teen Titans, but it could just as easily be an Easter egg poking fun at exactly what we're doing right now. Another big point of contention is that Jason Todd's character is fundamentally different from Red X. In the comics, when Jason Todd came back, he was primarily a gang leader, an arms dealer kind of, and a mass murderer, all in service of his end goal, which was to enact revenge on Batman. So why make a conscious decision to change his MO to just a thief in the TV series? When these characters are adapted for television, specific details may change, but the core of the characters always stays the same, with some exceptions. Changing Jason Todd to just being a thief would be like adapting Selena Kyle as an assassin or a gang leader, so why would they so fundamentally change Jason Todd's character in this way? You could make the argument that it's because Teen Titans is a kids show, but then that sort of devalues Todd's character because then he has no one to enact revenge upon, which removes one of his primary motivations, which stunts him as a character. And at that point, you might as well just use a completely different character, right? You know, he's just like Batman, except he has a bunch of superpowers and flies around and dresses in blue and wears an S on his chest. But other than that, he's Batman. Wait, that might have actually happened in the comics once. Was Batman ever Superman? And finally, let's not forget that the first person to mention the Jason Todd theory was Beast Boy. The show planted the idea in our heads. Whether it was to nudge us in a specific direction or to just misdirect us with red herrings, who knows? But keep in mind, Jason Todd usually has a reason to be in the stories that he's in. He has a motivation. That's why the characters that he disguises himself as are always revealed to be Jason Todd. But this kind of moment never really happens with Red X. So if Red X is Jason Todd, why build up this mystery about his identity without ever having it pay off? If this theory is true, it comes off as confusing storytelling at best. Okay, so hear me out here. All of the evidence about Red X is circumstantial. It's pretty clear that this was a mystery that was never meant to be solved. And it certainly wouldn't be the first mystery to go unsolved in Teen Titans. I mean, just look at Slade. While we know that Slade is Deathstroke is Slade Wilson, he was still never unmasked in the series. Except that one time. Those 2 times, but we never really learned anything from those moments. There was never really a need for us to, and maybe the same is true for Red X. And how this differs from a similar mystery like who shattered Pink Diamond, which we've talked about in the past, the identity of Red X isn't pivotal to the overall plot of the show like Pink Diamond's shattering is. Not to mention that the show ended over 10 years ago and Red X has barely shown up anywhere else. He's a villain unique to the Teen Titans. Look at this character. In the entire 65 episode run of Teen Titans, he made 2 substantial appearances, all adding up to just under 8 minutes of screen time. The show ended in 2006. It's been 12 years and we're still talking about this mystery. And there's something to be said in the joy of an unsolved mystery. It's a huge part of why this show exists. If I, or even the creators, came out and said that Red X was actually Jason Todd, for example, the mystique would kind of vanish and cheapen the experience of this fantastic show. But let me end this by saying that if you think that Red X is Jason Todd, that's cool, because Red X is whoever you want him to be. As we've said, Teen Titans exists outside of any other DC animated universe. And despite all the wrestling we did with the timeline in this episode, you could use that to explain away pretty much anything. Red X could be Jason Todd, despite the continuity and character changes. He could be the illegitimate son of Batman and Catwoman. Hell, brand loyalty be damned, he could be Deadpool. But in my mind, Red X is just Red X. And on the plausibility meter, I personally am going to rate the conspiracy of Jason Todd being Red X 1.5 containers of incredibly dangerous xenothium ore out of 5. But that's just me. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on who could be hiding behind Red X's mysterious mask, or do you think that this mystery is best left untouched? Who's your favorite Titan, and why is it Raven? And even though it may not have the best reputation among fans, what do you think about Teen Titans Go to the Movies? And you know what? I'm gonna drop a bomb here. I love Teen Titans, but Teen Titans Go as a show doesn't deserve half of the hate that it gets. The amount of times it gets rerun though, this is a debate for another time. But now that I've opened that floodgate, let us know in a civil fashion what you think. Be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments, and also don't forget to like this video, and if this is your first time here, subscribe to channel Frederator for all sorts of awesome videos. And also be sure to leave us any conspiracies you'd like us to take a look at in a later episode. Don't forget to ring that bell icon to become part of our notification squad, and remember, Frederator loves you.